Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the FloridaMan40k podcast. I'm Daniel Smith and I have with me Captain James T. Prescott.
Hey.
And John, the Yellow Submarine Lennon.
Howdy, howdy.
So, we've got a pretty good show lined up for today. We're going to talk about list construction. Everyone's talking about the new Marine release, so what we're going to do is talk about how to kill them. And we're going to finally cover some Nova missions, as well as probably talk about the ETC and some other tournaments that happened this weekend. And as always, we're going to do our 5-minute meta. So with that, let's dive in.
All right, you guys ready? You guys excited?
Always excited. That's my secret.
That's what I love. All right, so starting things off, we're going to actually do a quick little summary about the ETC, I think, before we do anything else. First of all, congratulations to Team England / Team UK. I never know which one to say. We're going to go with England because I think that's what's on their shirts. They ended up going 5-0-1, 5 wins and a draw, and that led them in first place. I think they played Australia in the final round, came out victorious to win the whole event. But if they had tied, they would have been passed by the Russians. Russia finished in second place. Third place, I believe, was Poland. Fourth was Australia. And the United States ended up in 6th place. That may sound like a little bit of a drop-off. After all, last year, we did win the event. The Royal We, I didn't help. But still, in a field like ETC, 6th place is actually very impressive. And obviously, they had a very difficult couple of weeks leading into the event with the death of Jeff Robinson. So all things considered, I'm actually still very proud of how they performed. And they definitely represented the country well. So cheers to the United States. Congratulations to England. Nick Nanavati needs to be banned and chapter approved.
I can get behind that.
Yeah, that's the only explanation at this point.
Yeah.
Nick, in case anyone didn't know, was on Team USA last year when they won. And for reasons I'm not fully aware of, he was not on Team USA this year, so he ended up on Team England. And Team England won again. So Nick is getting all of the trophies, and we're all just living in his world.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Wait, so there might be some politics behind this, but how did he end up on Team England? Does he have some type of connection there?
There might have been politics. I'm not familiar with that. I won't pretend that I am. All I know is that Team USA this year, I think they wanted to include some new blood just to give more people the opportunity to travel to ETC. Nick was not one of those members. Not sure how that was decided. But once that was made known, I think England recruited him. You have 8 people on a team. I want to say at least 4, maybe 5 of your members have to be citizens of the home country. However, you can have half or less than half of your team as kind of mercenaries. It's designed to give smaller countries kind of a chance to compete because a smaller team like Luxembourg, for example, a smaller country may not have 8 people who are, both good players and able to afford traveling to a different country. Just because of the smaller population sizes, that kind of gives them a chance to compete. So that's what it's designed for, but England took advantage of this in free agency, and it paid off because they brought home the W.
Absolutely.
So I know our plan for next year then. We should go and solicit another country that doesn't really have Warhammer players. We could be like Japan's Warhammer team.
I think Japan actually does have a thriving Warhammer scene. However, they don't travel the ETC just because of distance.
So this will be the year.
And also because I think everyone needs to speak English, and I guess maybe they don't have that. We could go as the Bahamian team. The Bahamas are very close to the United States and to Florida specifically. And I don't think they have a lot of Warhammer players.
Yeah.
So we just need to move over there for, a week before the event, and then all of the Floridians can go to ETC. And I think, 36 teams, I'm willing to bet we could get top 34.
Probably.
Guaranteed.
Yeah.
That's actually
maybe.
not guaranteed.
We'll see.
At least top 35. I'll guarantee top 35. We would not be last place.
Who would be last? Who do you predict?
I don't know. I don't want to.
Don't want to predict
Yeah,
that.
I don't actually want to say that because I don't know who got last place this year, and I realized that if I say it and we make a Florida team, we would still probably lose to them.
Yeah.
We don't have any good players here.
No.
You know what? Maybe eventually we get a Floridian on the ETC team. But we've got 12 months before we have to worry about that again.
Yeah, there's no reason for a Floridian to be on the ETC team, honestly, because there are 3 Floridians in the top 10 of the ITC, and that just shows how bad we are.
I would say 2.5. Like, Mark Perry's technically from Mississippi, but he lives in Florida right now.
He's a Florida man.
He is a Florida. He wrestles alligators, so I think we give him a card anyway.
Yeah, he earned it.
Yeah, he gets a plastic flamingo and moonshine. Speaking of Mark Perry, we should congratulate our teammate on Brohammer because he managed to win Warzone Gigabytes this past weekend with a chaos list that looked a lot like Jim Vessel's chaos list, but worse in every way. But he did manage to go undefeated at an ITC major and get first place, so I probably shouldn't talk too much crap because I haven't done that this season.
Yeah, honestly.
He's done it twice.
What do we know as we're about to tell you about like list building and stuff?
Yeah, we know some things. I can build I can build a good list.
But apparently it doesn't matter if you're Mark Perry. You just grab those Pox Walkers. Sorry, they haven't been good in so long that
I actually forgot what they were called. Pox Walkers. It's a Dark Imperium model.
No, it's the Death Guard. It's just a basic Death Guard.
It came with the Dark Imperium box at the beginning of the edition.
Oh, that's right. I didn't.
And everyone got a ton of them, and then we all benched them like 3 months later.
Yeah.
But Mark Perry can win with them, apparently, so maybe I'll bust out my Pyrovores. I don't know. So, and I think the other event of the weekend, the other big one, I think there were two. It was Siege World was won by Ben Sherwin. He had 7 Eldar Flyers, 3 Night Spinners, and 3 Wave Serpents, kind of similar to Ruben Fernandez's Bay Area Open list. And what was the other event? Hammer of Wrath GT, won by, was that Bethany Cole?
No, that was the... So
no, that was the London.
Yeah, there's some confusion. I don't know if the London GT actually happened.
Yeah. There was an event won by Custodes, pure Custodes, and we're going to look up that person's name to give them some credit. But realistically, just go listen to Stat Center. They're going to do it better and with more Falcon sounds.
Absolutely. Which is the only reason to listen to it, honestly, is for the Falcon sounds.
That's true.
Not
do
for
like
any of the good
made-up names, though. Like Hal Beffelfinger.
Carlos Kaiser with his Custodes.
Okay. I think I actually met Carlos at BAO. He's a cool dude. Yeah. So well done to everyone there, but that's not really the main point of the show.
But I do want to throw in a little shout out as well. At the same Warzone Gigabytes, John Moore, one of our top players, got 4th place overall. So 4th place at a major is still very good. Mm-hmm. I do believe John said that's the best he's done at a major so far. So
congratulations to John. Hopefully he makes it on Stat Center this weekend then.
Absolutely.
That'd be good to hear from him.
That's just anytime one of the guys does well and kind of breaks through to that next step, now the next step for him is winning an event. So
yeah, hopefully he gets it soon.
Exactly.
All right. I guess we should mention there were a couple of scandals this past weekend. I don't really want to dive too deep into them because none of us were at the event, and you can probably get better information from people who were there. The big one would be that the Russian ETC team was docked points because of, I believe it was time violations, and that actually is what caused England to play Australia in the final round. It should be mentioned, since all the Americans will probably think, oh, those darn commies cheated. I think it was actually just a time clock issue that caused the points drop, and from all accounts that I have personally heard, the Russian ETC team were full of wonderful people to play against. So, worth mentioning because the ETC does points docking instead of a card system, and I think that's kind of cool, and they did implement it in this case. And in this case, it did take a top team and change their score, which potentially altered who won the event in the end. So, still well done to Russia for, despite that, getting 2nd place in a very, very competitive ETC. And it's just kind of cool to see that other tournaments in other parts of the world have different methods of enforcing rules, docking points, issuing cards, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that covers a little bit of tournament wrap-up, and let's roll into the next thing and talk about some army lists.
Yeah, sounds good to me. You ready?
Always.
All right. So what kind of spawned this topic for us this week? As I've said, I am making the transition to play Orcs. And Orcs are in a good spot right now where they have a lot of different options. And they're all pretty good. Obviously, you've been seeing Orcs winning a lot of GTs the past couple months, finishing top 4. And if you look at the lists, there's a common theme of bringing a ton of Orc Boys and Grots. But beyond that, a lot of lists are bringing Tank Bustas right now, where before they were just bringing a ton of Ludas. I know the American ETC team had 240 Grots and a unit of 10 Flash Jits, which a lot of people, myself included, just feel Flash Jits are overpointed for what they do. because they're just it's an orc shooting unit. How you can't make it that expensive usually. Like it's just not reliable enough. But basically, because there's so many different good options for orcs, writing a concise list that is fluid, fits your playstyle, takes a little bit of effort. So all that to say, basically we are going to go through how we write lists, what we do, how we play test, and get comfortable with a new army. Because part of meta chasing is you're going to be swapping armies. Sometimes you can go a year, even longer. Like I've played a lot of Chaos in 8th edition, but I've also played Tau. I haven't played the Necrons yet, but I've played Imperium, Knights. I've played other armies, even though Chaos is my primary. So just if you're keeping up with the meta, it's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm definitely an army hopper as well. Genius Stealer Cult and Tyranids are always my home, and it's always what I like to go to when they are competitive. But last year, for example, before the Genius Stealer Cult Codex, before Tooth and Claw came out, I've dabbled in some Eldar, I've dabbled in some Custodes, Imperium Guard. I have some Knights. Everyone's about to be playing Space Marines. So I think most competitive players will switch armies at some point. I think other than Brandon Grant loving Guard, I think everyone else does it. So I think it's just an important topic, and honestly, even if you're not a competitive player right now, building lists is very important, because if you want to become a competitive player, then you really want to kind of have those fundamentals ready. You definitely can take a list off the internet, and I don't want to discourage that at all, because some people are not great at writing lists. Mm-hmm. We'll obviously try to help with that, but if that's not what your strength is, some people don't have time. For example, a lot of people work full time. Maybe they have, a wife or husband and kids at home. Maybe you don't get to do a practice game every night. You may want to just take a list that's established and get to play it on a tournament and know that you're doing it with something good, even if you didn't have time to test that yourself. So I don't want to discourage net listing at all, but sometimes you do want to take a net list and change it. Sometimes you want to write your own list, and we kind of want to talk about that.
Exactly. And a good example of that is the Disco Rush list, 3 Lord Discordants, Mortarion, and your Demon Battalion. That's a list that I kind of was playing with some ideas. I hadn't really figured it out. All of a sudden that list pops up, and I'm like, well, my homework's been done for me. I'm just going to take that and go 3-2 at events. No, I've actually had more success with it. But anyways, so there's, again, no shame in net listing. I did make a few minor changes because of my play style to that list. But so that's essentially one of the things to cover at the beginning is even when you're copying a list online, just study it a little bit. Sometimes there's things you don't like. Feel free to change it. I mean, the lists are always changing and improving. So if you need to take a couple change in HQ to fit your play style, maybe you see that someone's using the orc boss on a bike. Well, your meta has a ton of terrain, so having an infantry on foot is actually better because you can Kool-Aid Man through the walls instead of having to go around it with a bike. Little things like that you can change just based on your meta and based on your play style. But to the actual list construction, I would say, for me personally, the first thing I do when I'm trying to write a list is just kind of figure out what my assets are going to be. And I don't care about battalions. I don't care about what formations. Really, I don't even care what faction, clan, knight, household. I don't care about any of that. What units do I need to get into this list to make it function properly? That's my personal approach when I start out. And then you figure out, okay, if I'm bringing 15 Ludas, I'm going to need Grots for that. I'm going to need a ton of CP because they're very CP intensive. So how do I get the elements that make this unit work into the list? So I kind of almost work backwards when I'm writing a list personally. What about you guys?
I actually do the same method, where I kind of pick what I'm going to have as my damage dealers. Because yes, everything else is important, but you do need to kill stuff in Warhammer. You need to kill something.
Yeah.
Ignoring the idea of the 30-point list for now. Killing things helps. So for Genius Stealer Cult, I kind of decide, is this going to be an aberrant list or an acolyte list? That's where I start. Because if it's going to be an aberrant list, I'm going to change what cult I am, because I want to fight twice. Where if it's an acolyte list, I'm going to go for a different cult because I want +1 to charge. And from there, you know, whether or not you're taking a couple elites or a couple troops kind of changes how my detachments are going to play out. If I'm already taking those Acolyte Squad's troops, well, then I can bulk out maybe a brigade, and maybe I can bulk out a couple of battalions. Whereas Aberrants, maybe I'm trying to feed them CPs if I'm Twisted Helix and I still need to go extra troops. At that point, I'm taking a lot of smaller squads instead of Acolytes. So I kind of do the same thing. Jimmy, from an Imperium perspective, since I think that's what you've been playing the most recently, what kind of units do you normally start with a list?
So I actually, have never, this season, written my own list. Not a single time. Now, last year, before, the LVO of 2019, I was playing Tyranids, and I wrote a list that I took to one event, I think. And I played against Leo. I think he beat me. I fought against a guard player that I beat, and then I think I lost the third. I went like 1-2 or 2-1 or something. I don't remember. Mm-hmm. But either way, it didn't go great. And then going into this new season, being like, I'm going to be competitive. I have played Imperium literally every single time. And usually how it starts out is I say, hey, Dan, what am I going to play for this thing coming up next weekend? And then Dan sends me a message, and then I'm like, well, I want to play Hormagaunts, though. And he's like, but Hormagaunts are bad. So then I just bring the list that Dan said.
Well, that's certainly one way to do it.
Yeah. Which, that too comes to Jimmy's newer to the game. There's some list nuances that it takes just figuring out. Making everything you want fit into 2,000 points can be challenging. So, there's nothing wrong with, hey, I want to play Imperial Knights. Do you know any Imperial Knight lists that have been performing well? And then I can, here you go. This is a couple of the top lists. And as you play test it, you figure out things you like, things you don't like, and you can tweak it and make it your own. But largely, again, that's use the resources that are around you. You're not independent with your books and a piece of paper and nothing else. You have as many resources as you possibly want. Don't be afraid to use them.
Mm-hmm. And I guess so. That's kind of interesting that you've been playing mostly nut lists. Nothing wrong with that. That's probably a good place to start. But I will say, if you have a list that isn't popular, I would say play it and figure it out, because sometimes a unit has been around for a couple of months and no one uses it, and then suddenly it's the best thing and everyone knows it. I did not like Punisher tank commanders for a while because vultures existed. And I told people in this room that I did not like Punisher tank commanders.
And two of the people in this room were...
In this womb.
In this womb. Yes. It's nice and warm in here.
Marriage is what brings us together. Sorry.
So, yes, Jimmy actually was like, hey, Dan, what do you think of these Punisher tank commanders?
Only because I didn't want to buy vultures. But I was like, these seem just as good. They have orders. They're really good for Mission 6 where you can boost to an objective anytime you want.
I was like, yeah, they're T8. The Castellan just got nerfed. They're 3-up armor. I really like this Gatling cannon tank commander that can shoot twice. And with the stratagem from the Vigilus detachment, it can move its full 10 inches and it can get an extra 6-inch range. It's really good. And Lennon was just like, no, shut up, vultures are better.
Yeah, this was in the pre-Caladius meta, to be in my defense. So I think they complement the Caladius literally perfectly.
Yes, they do.
But the point is, sometimes you may see a unit and you may think it's bad, and maybe the meta will change and it will become good even though nothing changed. Yep. Nothing changed for the tank commander. But the Castellan went away. The Caladius, you've got that long-range firepower you can put in to make people come close. Because you can't just outrange Punisher tank commanders and stay safe for the entire game when there are 3 Caladius behind it, because you're just going to get shot while doing nothing.
Exactly.
So,
and sorry to cut you off, but with Plague Bearers getting even more popular, the -2 to hit with vultures having to move, they can't even hardly hit Plague Bearers. Maybe
vultures
on 6s.
Do not have to move.
They can go in a hover mode, but
damn right.
They have to get there first. But anyways, point being, tank commander with the Vistroyan order hitting on 2s goes to hitting on 4s. Well, it's still 3 normally, so you can use Vengeance for Cadia, reroll 1s and 2s, and reroll all wounds. You're actually pretty good at killing Plague Bearers compared to vultures that need 6s, maybe 5s. So
they're alright. So anyway, sometimes a bad unit will become good, so you can always re-examine what you like and maybe didn't use before. And sometimes you will recognize something as good and most other people don't, and it'll And if you play it, you'll kind of see, yeah, this is good, and then other people play it. Like Tank Commanders, I didn't think they were good. Other people played them, did really well. I looked at it again, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's actually good.
Yep.
Once I got it on the table, I was like, yeah, this is the real stuff.
And that actually, jumping back in, is the difference between theory crafting and playtesting. You can read codexes, make points fit, do all that all day long, but nothing substitutes playtesting. Like, just rolling dice on the table against an opponent will give you infinitely more information than just reading the codex.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, well, it should do this. On average, I'll do that. Okay, well, when you start getting into the variances of actually playing a game, you got to see what your ceiling is, you got to see what the floor is, and just kind of have a feel for it and see what works for you specifically. Because, like, I ran the Gym Vessel Horde and did not do well. Like, it's not my playstyle. It doesn't work for me. That doesn't mean it's not good. Obviously, it is, because Jim has won in the ITC for a reason.
Yeah.
But it's not my playstyle. And that's where playtesting and understanding your playstyle really affects list building.
Mm-hmm. Let's kind of dive back a little more into like the fundamentals of list building. So first things first, you pick a couple units that you kind of want to base your list off of. It doesn't have to be a couple, like you could base it around an MSU style list, but even still, you're committing to a direction for the list. For my current list, I committed to double aberrants. So the first thing I did was I picked 2 units of 10-man aberrants, and then I was like, all right, if I'm doing 20 aberrants, I should do Twisted Helix so I can fight twice. Boom, decision 2. Okay, if I've got to fight twice stratagem, I should bring a lot of command points. So I'm going to go triple battalion. So I put 7 small units of Brood Brothers in. Then I started putting in more buffs for the aberrants, like +1 to charge, fearless, +1 to hit. Filled out my characters, and the list kind of wrote itself. At the end, I had about 400 or 500 points of kind of wiggle room once I threw in what I considered the bare necessities of everything required for triple battalions, all the command points to power the aberrants and make sure they get into combat. Then I kind of just added 2 units of acolytes just as a little bit of variety of different types of melee damage, and a Sanctus, and that was right about 2,000 points. It's actually like 1985, and I just keep throwing a different grenade launcher or mortar in every time I play the list, because I never like what I do with those last 15 points.
Yeah.
But if you kind of work in that direction, you get yourself to 2,000 points. Once you do that, though, I think you need to stop, look at the complete picture once you have it, and then decide, what things do I need this list to do? So, for example, if you play a melee army, you may not need screens, but it's still a good idea to have a couple. If you play a shooting army, you do want to definitely look at screens. You kind of want to ask yourself, maybe look at a couple of lists that have done well recently, especially in your area. So I might look in my area and say, okay, someone just won with Chaos. Do I have anything to deny the Witch? If I don't, maybe I switch an HQ, get a Psyker in there to get a Deny the Witch, get, like for Guard, you might switch a Company Commander to a Primaris Psyker, just so you have a Deny the Witch. Maybe free up points for an Assassin. Once you've got that, you kind of look at what tools your list needs. I would say what I always look at is, do I have things to screen? Do I have things to kill screens? Are all of my eggs in one basket? If so, how can what do I do if I lose that one thing? Do I have a backup plan? Yep. What do you guys kind of look at once you've got a list? You've got 2,000 points added up on Battlescribe. What do you guys kind of look at next?
Yeah, so for me, I kind of do again, similar to you. I flesh out the skeleton of the list and figure out exactly what I need. Chaos is what I know the best. I'll use that as an example. Generally, if you're doing a smite spam list, even the rest of the list doesn't matter at this point. You're going to have your Ahriman, your Demon Prince, your Sorcerer, Terminator Armor probably. You're going to have those 3 just at the beginning. You're going to have, then you're going to add your Plague Bearers because you have to have a screen. You don't necessarily need a screen clear. It's nice to have, but you don't need it because you've got all the smites. You're just going to, your list is built to control the board, not to table your opponent. And so essentially what you do is you build your core right there. And let's say that comes out to 1,000 points, 1,250 points, depending on which direction you're going with your Chaos archetypes. So then with the remaining points, like Lennon said he had about 500 points left. I usually have about 600 to 700. That's when you come up with an idea. and say, well, if I've got 700 points, I can fit a new Chaos Knight, and maybe I'll add a Khorne Demon Prince. Just random examples. Okay, so now I'm going to playtest that and see, does that work out? How is that synergizing? Yes, I filled the points. Yes, like the double Gatling Cannon Knight does really well at clearing screens. It helps against the Eldar Flyers. But is that necessary if I'm doing a smite spam base? So as you playtest and understand your meta, then you can make changes to the second half of the list. But the core kind of stays the same. And that's how I approach with my playtesting in my list writing.
Yeah, definitely. Whether or not you get to playtest a lot should affect how you write your list. For example, I don't actually, at the moment, I actually just started a new job. I don't really get to playtest much right now. I imagine that'll change soon, but right now I'm committing a couple extra hours a week to work, and it's working a lot more than I used to. So while that's great for many reasons, it does mean that I'm basically playing Saturdays at tournaments only now. So I maybe write lists that are a little less experimental, more tried and true. I'm not changing up a lot of my lists right now, just to make sure that I'm not wasting my weekend to find out that, yeah, I actually don't need to take Rage Runners in my list. But maybe if you have a tournament you don't care about, maybe if you do have time to playtest, definitely take some wacky stuff and see if it works.
Yep. And even like stuff that has been tested and works, like the Lord Discordant is a really good unit. It works really well with Mortarion in the Disco Rush list. That doesn't mean that's a unit that you can just pull out and stick into Chaos List X and it's going to work well. It has certain lists it does better in than others. And so understanding that aspect of list construction is also critical to having a successful list.
So let's think like Jimmy. You mentioned that you've mostly been doing net lists. Nothing wrong with that at all. I've done it myself. What army do you think you're doing next? I know you've been on the Caladius and Night Train for a while, and I think you were enjoying it, but I think you mentioned maybe an episode ago that you wanted to move on to something else. I seem to recall Tau.
Yeah. So the options right now are Tau and Chaos, and then I was hoping to look into Genestealer Cult as well, but there are a few units that I have to piece together to get that to work.
Okay.
So right now, basically one thing that I try to do, even in tentatively trying to build or modify those lists, is go on to 40k Stat Center or 40kstats.com and then see all of the top 4 placements in recent tournaments, and then not just necessarily taking a list off of there, but trying to see what each of those top 4 placers used for that specific army. So basically, like, read every Tau list that's won in the past few weeks or so, and being like, what are the essentials that they're bringing each time, the things that you should be able to consider if you don't have a lot of experience with that army.
Yeah, find the common thread that successful builds are using.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we were talking about. Find the skeleton of your list and then customize to fit your play style.
Right. So that's kind of what I'm looking into right now. I'm still in the process of painting. I've made a lot of progress with the Tau.
Okay.
I've only gotten to play 1 game with them so far and no games with Chaos yet. So it's kind of a situation of wanting to be able to play test before seeing what direction I go in.
Understood, totally. Are you going to the RTT this weekend at Coliseum Comics?
I am currently signed up, but I'm not sure.
Okay. So theoretically, if you were to go, what faction do you think you'd take?
I hope to play Tau. I would like to get a game in this week sometime.
Okay, so let's say we go Tau. You could net list. You could just take, for example, Richard Siegler or Devin Swan's list. They're both good lists. Obviously, Siegler's on our team, so you could talk to him about it, get some good insight. But what kind of appeals do you like? What do you want to start with? Like, do you like Riptide? Do you like tanks? Do you like Ghost Kills? Do you like having more Fire Warriors than I have, you know... I don't know where I was going with that. Dice. More Fire Warriors than I have dice.
Yeah.
More fireworks than acolytes.
I've played that. It's terrifying. So, like, what kind of direction do you think you would want to go in?
So I'm going towards Tau just because I really like the idea of durability, which is weird for Tau, but with their savior protocols, it's basically a situation where you've got your Riptides and your commanders, and by the end of the game, you pretty much have the same firepower that you do at the beginning. Not necessarily the model count, because a lot of your drones, or most of your drones, are gone, but they can at least get you through those first few turns. I don't like the idea that I feel right now with the Caladius and the Knights, where you have some matchups where you're just like, I gotta go first or lose, and then you make that roll off, and then you just get blown off the map. You lose 2 or 3 tanks in one turn, and it's really hard to come back when your list is built around firepower. But with stuff like that or chaos, it's basically like shoot my front line for 3 turns and I'm still going to be there.
yeah.
It makes it feel a lot better.
Okay, so let's say we know then that we're going with a suit list. So let's say we're starting off with, as a bare minimum, probably 2 Riptides and 3 Cyclic Ion Blaster Commanders, and definitely have the opportunity to add that 3rd Riptide in. And then we're probably starting off with 30 drones. Again, might add more to that later, but 30 would probably be the bare minimum. That leaves you with a pretty good chunk of points. I've seen people do some different stuff with this. I've seen Colin Sherman, for example, takes a battalion of Fire Warriors because he wants to have a couple command points. Richard Seawer takes 2 units of Pathfinders with their drones. You've got a couple different directions you could go in. Something that I actually like, even though I think most of the Tau players would tell me that I'm wrong. I kind of like the Sunshark Bomber.
I was actually going to bring that up. It brings marker lights and it poops on plague bearers.
Yeah, you know what? It brings more marker lights. You always need marker lights. You can drop its bombs every turn, which blew my ever-loving mind when I found that out. Its bombs drop every turn. Like, what the heck? And you know what? Like, you get a good screen out of it. Yes, you can screen with drones, but flyers are also valuable screens, so I kind of like the idea of doing something like that. Once you take that core, what kind of, like, I guess the question becomes, what do we think the army needs at that point? Your Tau, yes, you can overwatch well, yes, you can fall back because you're almost off fly. You still need screens, so having something you can push out, I think, is very valuable. Siegel uses Pathfinder drones. Those flyers aren't bad, but the flyers can get shot a little more easily than other units. Stealth suits, even. Or ghost kills, like we've seen people use that.
This is where Will was having a ton of success with piranhas, actually, because they're fast. When you blow one up, they drop 2 drones.
Yeah, drop 2 drones. They still have the screen.
Exactly. So you maintain the integrity of your screen. So, and that's another good example of piranhas have had a little bit of popularity, but not a ton. But they still have some very good uses.
Yeah. And they are also super mobile, so you can reliably take things like recon. Mm-hmm. And then they can drop their drones if your Riptides need to get out of the castle. So you basically drop them nearby so that you still have savior protocols in the outfield.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So I guess kind of the question would be then, like, obviously playtesting would help here, but let's say we're writing a list right now, maybe knowing you'd only get 1 or 2 games before the event. What kind of appeals to you the most out of... I think what we've described are probably the best options, but you could fit in like a broadside unit. I've certainly seen people do that. What kind of appeals to you? Like, what have you spent a lot of time reading the Tau Codex? Really anything but Vespid is like, and Crew, are things that you could look at and make an argument for. Like, is there anything that you've looked at in this scenario that maybe, like any Tau units you've looked at and thought, well, most people don't take them, but they're kind of cute. I like hazard suits.
Yeah, I like hazard suits. I like Pathfinders only because the entire unit can take marker lights, and that list on its own, it's all HQs. So like an assassin, as far as HQs who have marker lights, an assassin can start to plink that off. And also, Pathfinders being the only thing with marker lights that are able to be shot because the character rule is protecting the rest, it becomes a really like savory target in the first few turns. Yeah. So they're going for it when they could instead be going after drones, which kind of prolongs your light fire to turns 2 and 3 for taking out the drones. So it lets the drones last a little longer because the marker lights become a potential priority. Yeah,
and I like that too because your character marker lights, like really you only need, unless your opponent has a ton of modifiers to hit, you only really need 2 to... You'd like to have 3 or 4, but with you have 2... at least 1 stratagem, usually 2 stratagems that give you additional marker lights. So you can get, with 2 characters that hit on 2s, you get the first marker light on them with a stratagem. So you're hitting on 2s, rolling 1s. You get another marker light, then you get D3 more marker lights. You can get to 5 very easily with only 2, maybe 3 characters. So it's CP intensive. You can't consistently do that. But if they take out your Pathfinders and even snipe one of your characters, you still have that option to layer marker lights and still take out targets. So that's a good point with Pathfinders of, it's, look at this juicy target, take it off the table, because I actually don't really care.
Yeah, and I have fallen into that as well. Tau, the reason that I like to go in that direction, I've fought against them more than anything else so I'm most familiar with them without having actually played them that much.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the idea of being aware of their weaknesses, because I feel like that would make me play them a little better. But I really like the idea of the Sun Shark bombers as well, because I really like flyers. Only issue there is I only own one of them, where I own most of the Tau line at this point, to be able to run most other things. I don't want to run broadsides, only because I've played with and against things that are able to get into close combat pretty easily. So unless you have a really tight castle that's able to stay that way, your broadsides are going to get... By turn 2, they're not going to be shooting anymore. Somebody's going to wrap them.
Yeah, I found that good players just kind of find a way.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, like, no matter what you think you're doing to stop it, there's always one little trick that you didn't see. Like, oh no, Mortarians switched to warp time and then got behind them. Oh no, someone had a fight twice stratagem and just got within an inch.
Yeah.
Like, someone always
Even,
finds a way, and then it's over.
Their firepower is so ridiculous.
That's
Whenever
great.
just touching them is going to turn it off, you have to find a way to do that.
Yeah,
Like,
I based my entire game around that.
yeah.
It literally, the game becomes a game of tag. If I tag the broadsides, I win. If I don't, I lose.
Pretty much, right? So with that in mind, if you were going to do Tau this weekend, you only have one plane. You can always reach out to local players, see if you can borrow something.
Yeah.
I have definitely borrowed models, borrowed armies. I have lent out models and armies.
You're about to borrow an army this
I'm
weekend.
probably going to borrow an Orc army this weekend to give it a try. I have lent out 2,000 points of Custodes before. For ATC, I think I brought 4,500 worth of points for various people just to make lists work. Definitely don't be afraid to borrow something to test a list out. For example, if we talk to Will, I bet Will has some planes.
Yeah.
So, maybe we reach out, see if we can find something there. I don't know if that's the best option, but we've seen it do well in different lists. Maybe if you can combine it, maybe you find something that works. It does give you good screening, and you can look at that list specifically, that Plague Bearer and... I'm sorry, that Riptide and Drone list, and know that it's very good, but it does have a weakness against Plague Bearers. I know Richard Siegler at BAO was finally knocked out by Jim Vessel. Last weekend at T-Shift, Colin Sherman was 4-0 and lost to Jim Vessel. There's a pattern here, and it's not just the fact that Jim Vessel wins everything. Chaos It's mostly it. But Chaos is kind of a weak spot for Tau, where, oh no, they went first and are now -2 to hit 4-up invul, what do I do? And the answer is, get wrecked.
Yeah. I, as a Chaos player, I know I've lost games to Tau in practice games. I'm having trouble remembering a tournament game that I lost to Tau.
Yeah.
And at ATC, like, that was one of our plans, was just put me into the Tau player. I will win.
Yeah, and that's not to say that it's impossible to win with Town to Chaos, but if you look at that and say, I have good Chaos players in my meta, this is something that will be difficult for me, maybe you do take a specific tool just for that matchup. So
Exactly.
maybe you do take Sunshark Bombers with 3 Riptides and Drones and Commanders, and you don't take the Pathfinders, and yes, you lose the Grav Drones, you lose a couple drone bodies, but you still have screens you can push out quickly in the Sunsharks, but you gain mortal wounds and a little bit extra firepower for turn 1 kills. You give up some kills early, but Tau kind of does that already. But the ability to really dump mortal wounds on Plague Bearers, I think, would actually be very valuable.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
that's an option.
And I wouldn't say that that's a net list. Like, yeah, you can take a popular list, Richard Siegler's, you can make some changes to it, and, I mean, it's still, like, that's probably 400 points different than his. Like, that's not a net list at that point. So maybe run something like that. Maybe run that in a practice game, see how you like it, and if not, you can fall back to the list that has been proven to do well, Richard Siegler's list. But once you get those models on the table, you'll kind of know if what sounds like, hey, maybe it will work, you'll find out if it does.
Maybe a little bit long form of getting there, but that's essentially, those are the questions you ask. That's the process of, I have my skeleton, how do I flesh this out?
Yeah, we definitely took the long way to get to that list, but I think we're really experts at taking 5-minute conversations and turning them into 10 minutes.
Or 20.
Or 20. And speaking of, is it that time?
I believe it is.
I believe
What
it
time
is.
is it?
The 5-minute meta.
5-minute meta. Let's go, boys.
Yeah, dog.
All right, so I believe the list that we came up with this weekend, Daniel, I think it was your honor of choosing this weekend. Correct me if I'm wrong, it was Stephen Mitchell's Necron list?
Yes, it was. Necrons, again, That's what we talked about in week 2 was Necrons.
Was it Necrons?
Yeah.
Was it Michael Timpe's list?
I think it was.
Well, you know what? We like Necrons here.
We
Shiny
do.
little death bots.
Since Lennon's going to borrow my orcs this Saturday, I'm
Saturday?
going to play Necrons.
Yeah, we're all changing armies for this weekend.
I'm calling Riley out because she is afraid of Necrons.
Who wouldn't be? Honestly. They have skeleton faces. Sometimes they wear your skin. Like, I don't even like being in my skin. I don't want you in my skin.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so let's go over that list real quick.
Okay.
So Stephen Mitchell, just for context, went to Warzone Gigabytes this past weekend, which was a major. It was, as I recall, Warzone Atlanta format. It was Warzone Gigabytes. But even still, this kind of list could definitely find success in the ITC because it does rely on killing things, being on objectives. Warzone has some endgame stuff. It has some progressive stuff. It has some stuff where you dig objectives and they disappear. Yeah. That always weirded me out. But you could still take this kind of list and find success in ITC format. So to give you guys the list, I don't know, do you want to read it?
I just want to say one thing. Similar to the other Necron list, the big takeaway here is there's no Doom sides. So it's the same thing we were just talking about in list building. He took some elements that are tried and true and decided, okay, I like this part of it. I'm going to completely rewrite the list and... go ahead.
Yeah, that's definitely good to mention. So let's give the list here. So everything is Sautek. So starting from the top, we have the Cryptech with Staff of Light, Emotech the Stormlord, 29 Immortals, all of them are Tesla, so you're 10-10-9 right there to fill out a battalion. You have the Catan Shard of the Deceiver, which is not a normal take. Triarch Stalker, again another fringe choice. 2 Tesseract Arcs from Forge Roll. I'll kind of go over those rules right at the end. And then you have a Spearhead of, again, Sautek, a Necron Lord with Staff of Light, and 3 Doomsday Arcs. So we know what the Deceiver does. He lets himself and D3 other units kind of redeploy right before turn 1, so after you know who's going first, which is very valuable. Those units have to be 9 inches away from the enemy, but they cannot charge. However, there's not a ton of melee in this list, so I don't see that as a disadvantage. I think it's more designed to get those, those Doomsday Arcs into a good firing lane where they don't then have to move and you can get that really good damage. Or if you're suddenly going second, you can use that to get away from being shot by something that you don't want to be shot by.
Another thing that I really like is when I use Plague Bearers and I see Immortals on the table, they dump out a ton of shots.
Oh, yeah.
So I deploy, 30.5 inches away, so they have to advance to get to me, which stacks a -1 to hit, so I'm negating the Sautek strat, and I'm negating my Will Be Done. So with this, they can just drop in and say, no, I don't even have to move, I'm not dealing with your modifiers, and once you get to that point where they can get within 12 of an Alteok Flyer, for example, anything like that, you get rid of those negatives to hit. Sautek stacks the positive modifiers to hit, and suddenly your defense that relies on not getting hit, well, that's all they're doing is hitting you now, so you're not going to have a good time. So that's one piece of tech that I really like the Deceiver for.
All right, so let's go over the Tesseract Arc. I think we have actually gone over this before, but it's still a weird, not often seen piece, so I'm going to go over it again. It has 2 Gauss cannons, which are kind of like the smaller version, heavy 2, strength 5, -3 damage D3, 24-inch range, so it's 4 shots there, it's nice. It is T7, 10 wounds, 3 up armor, has quantum shielding, and has a 5 up invuln, so it's reasonably tough. 200 points, it's not cheap, but it's not horribly expensive, and it does have some good durability against certain types of firepower. The big gun, however, has 3 options. It has a AP2 damage 1 flamer that always wounds on 2 against non-vehicles, heavy D6 shot, strength 8, -3 damage D6, or 24 inches assault D6, strength 5, -4, flat 3 damage. So lower strength, but pretty good profile on the second 2 of those options. Gives it some good anti-tank, which, in addition to the Doomsday Arcs, is a lot of good anti-tank. Yep. So he definitely has a lot of good anti-infantry shooting in Immortals, a lot of good anti-tank in these 5 quantum shielding vehicles. Definitely has some good tools.
And one thing I really like is the Strength 5, Damage 3 is really good against elite unit options.
Yes.
So Damage 3 is really important against Aberrants.
Don't say it.
It's good into Dark Eldar Grotesques. Not amazing, but they have that Feel No Pain, so when you put 6 wounds on them, for every 2 you deal, like you're getting through them quickly enough, like comparatively.
Yeah, I think the strength 5 versus tough 6 is not very good there. But
True.
just in general, there are several elite units in the game right now.
Bullgrin.
Oh, these are so good against Bullgrin.
Exactly.
Flat 3 damage is amazing.
Yeah. But again, I'd say Aberrance and Bullgrin is enough of a reason.
Yeah.
Beyond anything
and you know
else.
what? And if you're not playing against those, you switch the profile and you find something else to do.
Yeah.
I think you'll get it done. So I think the unknown parts of this is the Deceiver are what I really like. I always like the Deceiver, and Necron players in general don't use him. I always think that the Phantasm ability is just phenomenal. And worst case scenario, the Deceiver is good in melee, and he does mortal wounds occasionally. And he's a character, and he's reasonably tough, and he explodes well when he dies. He's not bad on his own merits. Just the ability to Phantasm. Sometimes you're playing against Caladius, and you just need to move out of the way before you get shot to pieces. Just having that ability, I think, is very good in games with punishing firepower where you want to be able to go second to play the mission, but you need to survive if you go second. And just being able to move around, I think that's very valuable.
Yeah. Even because it's just 9 inches away, Necrons are kind of slow, so you can play the board control game and just drop down into a magic box with a squad of 9 or 10 immortals and just put the immortals into the magic box and say, this is my box now, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. Well, they might come get it, but that's what you got the Deceiver for.
Exactly.
No, definitely got some good tools in this list. I think he went 4-1 over the weekend. I'm actually going to pull it up real quick to see what he might have lost to, just to kind of give some more context on the list. Other than that, I would say that he's doing different things from the normal Necron list. I think really what I like the most is probably that he doesn't have the the Doom Scythes, where he's not building his game plan around a unit that he could just go second with and lose the entire point of them. So I think that's kind of what I like the best. Daniel, do you have a single point of it that you really like?
Yeah, I think for me it would be the Tesseract Arcs stacked with the Doomsday Arcs. Because that's just, again, it's 5 vehicles instead of 3 that are reasonably durable, reasonably killy, decent range or mobility or both, depending on your needs in the game. So you're layering more similar effects, and you're just telling your opponent either you can deal with me or you can't. So that's what I like, is just, again, the saturation of redundancy, which is necessary in a lot of Necron builds.
And so just to give some context, Steven's one loss was round 4 against Colin Watts. Colin was running a very interesting Custody list. He had 3 of the normal Grav tanks, very interesting, 3 of the Palace tanks, and 3 of the new Admech Scorpius tanks. Between all of that is an absolute metric ton of either flat 2 or D3 damage.
Which is designed to kill
Necrons. And it's all strength 6 or 8, so it's all wounding the toughness 6 fairly well. All has some AP, so it's punching through the 4 armor. I think this is just not a very good match.
That is a list specifically designed to beat this Necron list.
Yeah, that's kind of a tough draw for Steven. So you know what, maybe, but even still, 4-1 with what has previously been considered a very meh codex. That's very impressive still. So I think it's got some value to it. Also, something to consider is that Necrons are probably not seeing any nerfs anytime soon. Let's just be honest here. Necrons do not need to be nerfed. The Caladius needs to be nerfed. When those type of units start phasing out of the meta, you kind of have to look at what's going to fill the gap. Something like this Necron list could absolutely step up if the beta rules get updated and be something very, very viable where Steven's going to be ready for that. And maybe not everyone else is.
Exactly.
All right. So we just talked about Warzone, a event with kind of different missions from the ITC. Do we want to launch into Nova missions, perhaps?
See, part of me just wants to keep prolonging it and just say we'll do it next week and do it next week.
I think we're getting close enough that we're going to do it now.
Yeah, I know. I just, how it is.
So, of us, I think I'm the only one who's going to be able to make Nova this year, unfortunately. But to make up for it, I'm going to play in 2 events. I will be playing in the Nova Open, obviously, and I'll be also in the Invitational somehow. Based on last year, it turns out that you need a mediocre podcast to make it into the Nova Invitational, and this is the only way I could do it. So, without further ado, I'm going to launch into the Nova missions. I'm going to kind of spearhead this one because I've practiced it a couple times, and since I'm the one going, I've spent the most time researching it.
Yep.
But we'll break it down, primary, secondary, tertiary. There are a lot of similarities between Nova missions and ITC missions. That's not to say that Nova copied ITC, because I think Nova actually did it first. But I know that the development teams behind both missions collaborate a lot. Mike Brandt runs Nova and has been doing so very successfully. Obviously, Reese, Frankie, the frontline team run those. I think they're very close, and I think that they kind of bounce ideas back and forth between each other. So there are some similarities where you'll see some good stuff in ITC still be good in Nova format. So first things first, the primary for Nova is all objective based. So there are 9 Nova missions, and they all have a preset deployment. They all have preset objectives, and every single game has 6 objective markers. Instead of doing a kill more, hold more, kill and hold scenario like ITC, Nova, the primary, which is worth a maximum of 18 points, is only holding objectives, which is very, very different. And what also is different is that you get a little bit of choice going into these things. So at the beginning of every game, you actually get to pick progressive or end game as how you want to score the primary. But again, either way, it caps you out at 18 points. So let me break down how you get those points. And I am scrolling to it right now, and it's taking way longer than I thought. There we go. So for progressive, you get, again, max 18 points. Starting at the beginning of your turn, starting with turn 2, you get 1 point if you hold an objective. You get 1 point if you hold 2 objectives. You get 1 point if you earn more than your opponent. I'm sorry, if you control more objectives than your opponent, you get 2 points. And then I think there's like a fourth, similar to a bonus. For example, if you get 2 in this mission 1, if you get 2 more objectives than your opponent, you earn 2 points. I think one of those changes in every mission, like the bonus for ITC, but the basic of it, if you control 1, get a point. If you get 2, hold a point. Or if you hold 2, get a point. And if you hold more than your opponent, get a point. I think that is pretty constant. So you kind of look at that as maybe turn 1, you get no points because you can't. Turn 2, you spread out, you control the board. You hold 1, you hold more, you've got a second one, you've got 2 points there, you hold more than your opponent. That's like 4 points that you can get on turn 2. If you do that, for 4 turns, there's your 6, if you do it for 4 turns, you get 16 points. You're almost at your 18, you just need to hold 2 on the last turn. So you can get to your 18 points, and if you have a couple good turns, you can get up to 6 points in a turn. So you could max out the earliest you can max out your primary is by turn 4, and then turn 5 and 6, you can just abandon objectives and run away. But end game, obviously, kind of not common in 8th edition anymore, but it's in the GW rules. You could absolutely just ignore objectives for 5 turns, and then on turn 6 jump out onto them. For end game, you get 4 points for every objective you control, and 2 points if you hold more objectives than your opponent. And so again, you're looking at, you need to get your 18 points, so you just need to hold at the very end of the game 4 objectives, which by definition would probably be more than your opponent because they could only hold 2 at that point. So if you just jump out on 4 objectives at the end of the game, that's your 18 points. This is kind of risky though because you make this decision before you know who's going first. For example, if you play Tau, you may think, oh, I'm playing Gene Stealer Cult. I do not want to pick progressive objectives. They're going to be all over the board until I shoot them to death. Because Gene Stealer Cults, unless it's just a tabling, is usually kind of weak by the end of the game, but they've run up the score. So Tau could think, oh, I'm just going to jump on 4 objectives right at the end after I kill the Gene Stealer Cult. It'll be great, I'll max my points. But if you go second, that works great. If you go first, Gene Stealer Cult gets their turn 6, suddenly everything pops out of a building, runs on an objective, contests it, and your opponent gets the final say on your primary score, and you could go from 18 points down to 4 points, or down to 8 points, and then they've got their progressives, and they win the game. So I personally think that you probably, if you're designing a list here, you probably want to build around the progressives, so that's going to take it back more towards ITC style. Mm-hmm. However, this is scored at the beginning of your turn, not the end. So you need to think, how am I going to survive through my opponent's turn? That's kind of a tricky proposition.
Yeah, you can't just move your guardsman onto objective, hold it, and then get shut off the table and not care. So you've got to make the effort to hold those objectives now.
What I would personally say then are as things that I would take, and I intend to take, to make sure that I am scoring well here. I'm going to take units that are more durable, and I'm going to take more of them. So sure, if I put a Venom on an objective, my opponent can probably just shoot it off, and then I don't get the point. If I put 3 Venoms on the objective, and I have 3 squads inside, and a character behind those 3 Venoms, they're probably not knocking me off of that unless they have an objective secured melee unit that's sweeping in there. So I think having an MSU style list is actually going to be very beneficial in Nova, especially because none of the primary points involve killing the opponent. Nova missions max at 33 points, and 18 of those points are the primary, so guaranteed 18 of those points will not come at all from killing any of your units. So I think MSU will be very strong there. Characters, they need to kill a lot more units to be able to shoot at characters, so I think having a couple good characters or cheap characters that you can run onto objectives and then screen is another good way to hold an objective and make sure you don't get shot off of it. But again, you have to watch out for melee threats. So for me, I'm probably going to take a very melee-heavy army with a lot of screens and a lot of characters, not a lot of shooting. I think it'll lead to high-scoring primary games because I'm not going to be able to shoot people off their objectives, but I think I'll be able to get a lot of primary points by scattering cheap characters around onto objectives, pushing melee threats forward, and having a lot of screening units flying around, or running and deep striking around. No one flies on my list. And at that point, it's going to be very hard for them to shoot off my backfield objectives because I'll screen out the deep strikes, have cheap little characters I don't care about, like a Nexus and a Biophagus and a Sanctus, on different objectives, and they're not really going to be able to shoot that away. And with that method, I think I'll be able to get a lot of progressive points, and very rarely would I commit to taking endgame. But the other way to look at this would be kind of looking at the max firepower list, like a Caladius list. It doesn't give up a lot of kills. Caladius and Knights are all very hard to kill, and tank commanders. So that's cool, but that's no longer a mission strength. But if you've got the mobility to move around and get line of sight on objectives, you can do enough damage to just win the game that way. So I think that you can see mobile gun lines do very well in Nova. I think you can see MSU do very well at Nova. I don't think that you will see static gun lines do very well at Nova. I think that broadsides are not going to be very viable. You've got the big Nova Ls in the middle. Those obviously play a very large role. Those are ruins. So I think that you could see mobile gun lines. You can see flyers do very well. Nova's not really going to have magic boxes, to my knowledge. And I think Gene's Thurl Demon Horde's unit board control armies, I think those will be very rewarding in Nova format as well.
The one thought I had for the end game is, with the knowledge that a lot of people are going to play MSU board control, and again, it'll depend on secondaries, I guess, but if you had a list like triple Crass Crusaders and fill in the blank, something that's relatively mobile, super killy, I think there could be some play, but it's a lot riskier to just march up the table and just mow things down getting ready for turn 6 and play the secondaries that way and just say, I know I'm not going to win board control, but I'm going to wipe you off the table until I get to my objectives, which I'll just do by the end of turn 6.
Yeah, and you absolutely can do that. Because there's not magic boxes, the Novels do hide some stuff, so I think having one good melee threat would be very good, but if you've just got a lot of mobile firepower, for example, I think like an Eldar Flyer list with Venom spam and maybe one grotesque unit, I think would be awesome in Nova format. Where you've got the mobile firepower to run around, kill things, you've got weight of fire to clear out MSU, you've got your own MSU to make sure that you're scoring points throughout the game, and you've got that one grotesque unit to go hide at an L and to say, hey, don't come over here, guys. Because no one wants to come near grotesques. I think that would be a very good build, maybe a little twist on the normal Eldar build. Like in ITC, you probably don't take Venom spam and grotesques because Venoms give up easy kills where the flyers don't. It's not as big of a deal for Nova because it's only secondaries.
Yep.
Speaking of, let's go through the secondaries real quick. So very similar to ITC, you pick 3 secondaries per game. Each secondary is worth a max of 4 points. And so you score 12 maximum secondary points, taking the points to 30 so far. There's 3 more that we'll talk about later. There are 12 secondaries. I'm going to give a quick rundown of them, but it should be noted, and I actually think this is super fun, that there are 8 secondaries that you can pick per game, where you kind of have to choose which of those 8 you'll draw your list from. So you can't always count on one secondary being good. So having for example, Gene's Thurl, I pick Recon almost every time. I won't be able to pick Recon every mission, so maybe I need to switch my list up a little bit, look at what combination of secondaries I'll be able to choose from, get a list that can score a lot of different secondaries rather than picking 1 or 2 that it always takes. So going down the list, we've got Moment of Bloodshed. This is similar to Butcher's Bill. It's destroy 2 enemy non-troop units during a battle round to earn 1 point. So unlike Butcher's Bill, it's battle round, not player turn, so it gives you a little more time to do it. But it's a non-troop unit, so you're going to have to really look at your opponent's list and make sure you're doing this right. Because my list, for example, has 21 units, but 9 of those are troops and 10 of those are characters. I think I have 2 non-troop, non-character units. Maybe you don't pick this one against me. Cull the Hordes. This is ITC Reaper. Kill 20 models, get a point. Awesome. Breakthrough. If you get one of your units wholly within the enemy deployment zone at the start of your turn, earn 1 point. Again, it has to be wholly within, so every single model entirely within, and at the start of your turn, meaning your opponent can kill it first. It's good. I think Eldar Flyers, for example, can take great benefit of this, but you're going to want to look at when am I going to do this, when am I not going to do this. It's kind of like Line Breaker. Reconnaissance, if you have your unit wholly within the table quarter, that means it's a little bit harder than ITC, because ITC you need 1 model. This is 1 unit. Again, this rewards MSU, whereas a 30-man Plague Bearer unit can obviously get 1 model into a table quarter very easily. Getting all 30 models into 1 table quarter, that does become a little harder. Getting a Venom into a table quarter, super easy. Eldar Flyer, super easy. Pre-measure and you're good. Old School, it's exactly what you think it would be. Strike the Rank and File is to the opposite of the first one, Moment of Bloodshed, where you have to kill 2 units, but they have to be troops. Other than that, you can't take it at the same time as Reaper, or whatever they call Reaper, Cull the Hordes. I'm going to go through this really quick. Marked for Death, it's marked for death without a power level limit, so just pick 4 units. Shoot the big ones, destroy a 10-wound model. Headhunter, it's Headhunter. Titan Slayer, destroy a Titan unit, get 2 points. Engineers, very similar to ITC. And I'm sorry, there are only 11 objectives, not 12. So, obviously a lot of these are similar to ITC, and you're going to kind of do that similarly to how you're designing your list. Me personally, I think having the option to mark for death is probably going to be one I take a lot, because I can just pick 4 units that are valuable to my opponent, like their damage dealers, and I'm going to say, hey, are you actually going to bring these close to me? Because if so, I'm getting points. I don't think I'm actually going to change how I design my list much here. Let's just look at one mission to kind of give an example of how these secondaries work. So they're called Tailored Ops, and in round 1, I can only pick Moment of Bloodshed, Reconnaissance, Marked for Death, Titan Slayer, Cull the Hordes, Old School, Shoot the Big Ones, and Engineers. So I can't take the Not Behind Enemy Lines. I can't take the Kill All the Troop ones. But overall here, I can still take Engineers, Recon, and maybe Marked for Death, kill like 4 guardsmen squads that are up front, or kill their scouts, get my points there. I think that you actually still take this very similar to ITC. You tailor your list as you would for ITC, and you kind of roll with it. Mm-hmm. Finally, the tertiary points. These are very simple. You get 1 point for killing 500 points for your opponent's army, 2 points for killing 1,000 points, and 3 points for killing 1,500 points. Again, you want to kill your opponent. That makes sense. I wouldn't entirely change my list around that. What I might think about is how much I want to use a sacrificial unit. For example, the Disco Rush list with Mortarion kind of hinges on throwing Mortarion at your opponent, throwing 3 Disco Lords at your opponent, and having a lot of little stuff behind it, like Plague Bearers and a lot of characters. While that is awesome, if you feed your opponent 3 Discordants and Mortarion, that's right about 1,000 points if they kill those 4 units. And those units are almost always dying, so you're really giving up quite a few tertiary points there. That's only 3 points out of 33 possible, but if you're really trying to optimize a list, maybe you don't go for that style.
Well, and if they also pick those for Marked for Death, so suddenly now you've given up 6 points, and it can start building up a lot more when you have a sacrificial unit like that.
Yeah, that's very true. So maybe if you're going to use a distraction card effects, it should be something that doesn't have to go forward. So let's be honest here, Mortarion and Lord Discordant, they kind of have to go forward to do something.
Yep.
I mean, yes, you can use them as counter charges and just like, don't come over here, but that feels like a waste of their damage output when they do consist of so much of the list damage output. So that would be my only thing, is I don't think that a Disco Rush list is as good. That's just the most obvious example. I'm sure people come up with others, but having lists that sacrifice a large portion of their stuff to keep some cheap stuff alive maybe isn't the best approach in Nova. But again, it's only 3 points. I think you could play around it.
Yeah.
Really, I think the primary is the main difference and is the main one that's going to affect my playstyle.
Did you already say anything about whether they stack?
Oh, in the same way as ITC missions, a lot of the secondaries don't stack. It's the killing ones. So you can't get Headhunter and Marked for Death off of the same unit.
Right. Okay.
It's very similar to ITC in that format in the logical ways. I think Nova may have actually done it first, but again, they talked a lot. They're very solid missions. I enjoy playing them, and I've heard some really great feedback on the event, so I'm excited. But it's similar to ITC in that mission, in that aspect.
Okay.
Yeah.
So kind of hearing that, any armies that you two think, again, focusing on the primary, because I personally think that's where the big difference is. Anything you guys that really stands out to you guys?
I think orcs would do really well because they are a board control army that sometimes does damage by accident.
That's an interesting way to describe it. I would say orcs do a ton of damage, but
Yeah, but with ballistic skill 5, unless you're doing melee orcs, which is
melee orcs
way more consistent, but you got to get there, and
But you gotta
sometimes
So it's one
tanglefoot grenades happen.
Oof, you sound like a man who's been hurt before.
Yeah. Only once. Anyways, but overall, I do think like a ranged MSU orc list with probably close to 100 grots and 120 orc boys would do very well with shock attack mech and pick your flavor of shooty.
Well, let's talk about mech guns.
Oh yeah, mech guns.
Mech guns don't really.
amazing.
They don't give up the vehicle secondary. Yeah, they mark 4 mech guns and kill those 4.
Yeah.
And yeah, they get their not Butcher's Bill equivalent, so you can get good secondaries off them. But sometime you're going to get a mission where Butcher's Bill or the not Butcher's Bill isn't an option, and you have 18 mech guns and they don't get kill more points.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of hilarious to think
Absolutely.
about. Please, no one bring that. Please.
That is pretty ridiculous,
Yeah.
and I think someone should bring that.
I think it would be funny, but I do not own 18 mech guns or any other orc models.
Yeah. I only own 6.
Only 6. What a scrub. Yeah.
At $50 a pop, though, it takes time.
Yeah. Me personally, totally unbiased opinion. I think Gene Stealer Cult are great in this format. They usually go MSU, and I usually bleed kill points, but I usually get the holding stuff. I think that with clever play and placement, I can work around the scoring, the holding being at beginning of turn rather than end. Again, as I mentioned, durable melee units up front, characters behind, I think will get me good progressive points, and I no longer give up kill points. I think that's great for me.
Absolutely.
I think that list we talked about last week, the Necron list with the Lich Guard, because they can get a 3-up invul. Maybe even throwing in some like Can of Tech Wraiths, because they also get like a 3-up
So like an
invul.
invul and heavy Necron army?
Yeah,
That'd
and
be
Can
kinda
of
fun.
Tech Wraiths run really fast. So
Yeah.
like getting there and living through the opponent's turn with them is like specifically super, because you park yourself on 4 objectives, they're probably going to take you off at 1. Reliable.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If you have durable melee units to make them stay away. Again, I mentioned Grotesques, but same thing. Lich Guard or Wraiths could absolutely do it.
That's a very good point. Just saturation of invul and say, move me.
Yeah,
'Cause
the
honestly,
objective
like, that's-
control is what's making Necrons
Because
great.
I can't, so I won't.
That's true. Just try to interact with my 2-up, 3-up, 4-up invuls, whatever.
Mhm.
2-up invul wraiths
2-up
can
invul
still
wraiths.
happen.
And then they get back up because you have like an orb next to them or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got a stratagem to make them stand up, I think, and the orb helps that.
Yeah.
That's another strategy that would probably use well. Again, maybe you don't take Doom sides if you're going to Nova. Maybe you take your normal Doomsday arcs because, oh my god, those guns. But then you take some 2-up invul wraiths and you park them on objectives and you say, hi, I'm going to score these progressives while I'm shooting you to death. Are you going to change that?
And a really cool thing, the Deceiver here, because you're playing progressive board control, you can use that, not necessarily to just go all in because you're not scoring on turn 1, but you set yourself up in a position to where if they try to make the play for the objectives, you get to charge them, and if they don't, then you just get the objectives. So that does have some play there with a unit that is not as commonly seen.
Yeah, and Daniel knows this, but I want to clarify. You can't charge on the turn you use the Deceiver, but you can absolutely use it to set up turn 2 charges and to deter
Yeah,
people.
that's exactly what I mean. Is you place them turn 1, so when they advance on their turn 1, then your turn 2 you go in and charge.
Yep.
So that's the order of operations I didn't explain well.
Yeah, no, I understood what you meant.
Yeah, I know. But I just want to make sure everybody did.
Absolutely.
Because the internet is very mean.
It's true, especially to me.
Yeah.
But they love Jimmy. Jimmy's probably the best part of the podcast.
Me?
Absolutely.
Right here.
Snap into a Slim Jim.
I love you too, internet.
All right, so I think that's most of my thoughts about Nova.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to it. Nova has been on my personal bucket list for a while. You know, Nova and Adepticon were the big two for me because I've been following 40k for a while just as a wee lad and teenager and middle schooler. I obviously wasn't traveling across the country as much. But Nova, and specifically the Nova Invitational, just something I've always wanted to do. So Hopefully in, a couple weeks you'll hear about me on it. With that, honestly, like, as far as expectations go, I really want to win round 1. I don't want to get, because I don't think they've announced the field, but just looking at last year and looking at who's probably going to be in it, like, it's totally possible that my round 1 is like Jim Bessel.
Yeah.
Or maybe I play Nick Nanavati or Andrew Gardner or Sean Naden or one of the many people who will beat the crap out of me.
Yep.
I just want to win one game so I'm not one and done and just walking around like an idiot for the rest of the day. So that's all I want. I certainly don't expect to go into this event and win it. Would I complain? No, but is that realistic? Probably not.
Yeah. It's an immediate knockout?
Yeah, the Nova Invitational is single elimination, which I think makes it very fun, but it's 16 of what are supposed to be some of the best players in the country. Somehow they added me to the list, but hopefully I can just represent well, get one win in there and feel good about myself.
Yeah, they chose you as the Florida rep instead of Siegler.
Well, Siegler's also not going to the event, so it would be hard for him to do it.
Yeah, but
true.
If you're talking about good Florida players, let's be honest.
Why are you even talking about that at all? It's the real question.
Yeah, we don't have any. There's no good players in Florida.
All right, so what are we thinking for next week? I don't know if we have a topic for next week, Jeff.
Next week, we're going to talk about what kills Space Marines, because we didn't talk about that this week.
That's true, yeah, we completely
And I straight up opened with that. Mm-hmm. No, I didn't read or anything, just cold start, and it was great.
And we will not edit that out, because we just want people to be disappointed.
Yeah.
That's your hook. Next week, we will talk about killing Space Marines. We'll have the codex in hands by then, even though we've already read the YouTube reviews. But for now, we're giving you a break of Space Marine coverage. Come back next week for more of it.
We're also going to talk about Tyranids. We've been putting it off since episode 1.
That's
Y'all
true.
promised me.
We have promised Tyranids. We can look. Maybe we can even get a bat rep going.
To be fair, we talked about Tyranids today.
No.
Just not
enough.
Not
we have to have a whole episode.
We mentioned Tyranids. That's enough.
We'll have a lore section.
So here's the plan. We talk about Space Marines, how to kill them. We talk about Tyranids. How are Tyranids going to kill Space Marines? You take what is about to be one of the best armies in the game by most predictions, and you take an army that is not one of the best armies in the game.
The second
We're
worst.
going to try to figure it out.
Who's the worst?
Grey Knights.
Grey Knights get assassins though, man.
Yeah, I know, but pure Grey Knights.
Yeah, pretty bad.
Versus pure Tyranids.
Yeah, because Tyranids have Gene Stealer cult where...
Yeah. No, I'm saying, like,
You're
straight up,
right,
no allies,
well, I'm just
no
saying,
nothing.
like, assassins are to Gene Stealer cult. Like,
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the Battle of McCragg.
Yeah.
Tyranids versus Space Marines. Calgar
great.
versus Swarmlord. We're going to try to make something happen. And we will be filming a battle report very, very soon. We do not know exactly when that will be, but maybe our first battle report, I will take a pure Tyranids list, and maybe I'll try to find a Space Marine player. Maybe some Ultramarines. We try to recreate something dramatic here and get competitive.
I've got Death Watch I can play as Ultramarines.
That's not
literally,
the same thing.
Literally just use that example as what not to do.
Don't do that.
I was talking about that, but
Don't
I
do
know.
that.
No, we'll procure some Marines because like I know I've got intercessors, aggressors, repulsors, all.
We can phone a friend. We'll find some Marines.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's what's coming your way next. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. We do have a Facebook page up. We are on YouTube. Hopefully this will be posted to some other podcast elements as well. But if not, the next one will be. I think that's all I've got.
And if not, we'll keep saying that.
And if not, we'll keep saying it. Anything else from you guys before we say goodnight?
No, I think we're good. This was, I think, pretty good. Pretty good conversation.
Yeah, I think so.
And honestly, the entire theme did end up being about writing lists, because even preparing for the missions you're going to have, you need to have that in mind for your list, the meta. So again, all of the information, just think about that when you're writing your next list. And if you do terribly, it wasn't our fault. And if you do great, it was all us.
Absolutely. Jimmy?
I agree.
Perfect. Couldn't ask for more. All right, so that's it. Good night. Feel free to like, subscribe, follow.
Yeah, the usual things. In like 100 years, well, 500 years after we've blown each other up and the aliens come and find it, they're going to think that was a common Earth greeting. Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe.
So they're going to start saying that. So
good night.
Bye.
Bye.